thank you guys for coming. Really appreciate it. This is, I think, the first cooking demo we're doing here.
Yep.
First of many, hopefully. And so it'll be fun to get your feedback and response to the recipes and ideas and future demos, what you'd like to see. So my name is Faith.
I'm Tony Quintana.
I'm Gabriel.
So I'm the plant-based eating program manager with Animal Protection of New Mexico. We're really, like Faith said, really excited to be starting this. Hopefully the first of many cooking demos in this kitchen. And so just a little quick intro about the plant-based eating program. For those who may have not heard of it, we're just working to increase plant-based eating throughout New Mexico using a variety of strategies such as what we're doing right here, cooking demonstrations, education, community outreach. We're also working with local restaurants and cafeterias and other dining establishments to increase the plant-based options on their menus. So that could include, local schools, hospitals, anywhere where people eat. We're just looking to get more plants, less animal-based ingredients in the menus. We're going to go ahead and, once I'm done talking, which will be very shortly, Faith is going to do the cookie demonstration, which you all hopefully have the recipe handout for. Gabriel is a dietitian who's going to be talking a little bit about the nutrition component tonight. Then we're going to wrap up with the food tasting, of course, and then question and answer Q&A session. So you can ask anybody questions. I think that's about it. I think we're ready to get cooking, right?
Yeah, let's
Cool.
do it.
So without further ado,
Yeah.
yes, one question.
Is this too soon? This is about, can I say a little bit about food?
Please do.
I have to censor her.
Okay, Faith is a local rock star who does she's a nurse as her profession, but then every minute off she's doing service work for animals and for everyone. So she is our local hero. So I just want to say that. And she's one of my favorite cooks.
Thank you for the intro. And
Yeah,
that was the perfect segue.
We're already hot in this kitchen.
All right.
Just out of interest, can people show how many people are vegan in the room? It doesn't matter. I'm just interested to know who's showing and stuff. Cool, awesome. Anyhow, I think that this is a really fun recipe because it's very basic and you can take it in so many different directions with flavors. It's soy-free, gluten-free, and delicious, most importantly. And so a comfort food for everybody, mac and cheese. And it's all plant-based, so that's why I love this recipe. And so anyhow, we'll get started. I've been watching my water boil for a while now, and so anyone who showed up early has been watching me watch my water boil. So anyhow, I'm watching water boil still for more noodles, because we're going to do two different versions. And Cody, I'm going to have you keep an eye when you're done, just when the water boils, we'll throw more noodles in. So we're going to start with the basic recipe that you guys all have, and so the vegetables that are in this are potatoes, sweet potato, onion, and carrot. And seasonally, I like to do butternut squash, which is kind of fun, but I wanted to keep with the most basic. You show up at the grocery store, you can get these ingredients anytime. Or if you are short on time, these are things that a lot of people have in their pantries. So we'll go ahead and get started. I will say that for this recipe, I'm kind of obsessed with Vitamix. I think they should pay me because I use them constantly and always promote using it because it's a really great blender. They last forever. But if you don't have a Vitamix, that's okay. You can do this recipe. I just recommend soaking the cashews for the recipe, so you can soak them overnight, or a quick way is just boil water, throw them in, and let them sit for about 15-20 minutes. So it's not like you have to have this, but it's nice because it does a really good job. So I pre-boiled these vegetables so you didn't have to watch unless you were waiting here early. So I'm going to throw in a bunch of vegetables that I've already boiled here. So it's the potato, onion, sweet potato. And I'm going to do this twice, so I have twice the vegetables in here. So I'm going to make an educated guess and try to mix it up nice and even. You just want to boil until it's tender. You can put the fork in. I mean, you can't really overboil, but if you do boil it a lot, the potatoes will start to fall apart, but that's okay. And I do want to encourage, if you have questions as we go, just shout it out. All right.
You didn't take the skin off the carrots.
No, so I didn't skin the potatoes or the carrots. I Never skin any of my vegetables because the majority of your nutrients are found in the skins of the vegetables. Most of your fiber and nutrients is in the skin and in the protection of the vegetable. So, and you can't tell the difference, so why not leave it? So we have our vegetables in there. I love cutting corners when I can, and I feel like it's healthy enough to cut corners, and I get this already squeezed lemon juice that I love, organic from Costco. So I'm going to cheat by using that. And for anyone who hasn't been to my demos before, I have the measurement. It is a tablespoon. I'm very much oh, that's a tablespoon. Glug.
If you're gonna cheat, that's the only one to cheat with.
Yeah, this is
There's
good.
some horrible ones out.
Yeah, there's some bad brands. This is a pretty nice one. You can get it at Costco, and it's $8.48 for 2 bottles. So,
Such a deal.
I know.
Costco should pay you too.
I know. Trader Joe's too. Look at all the Trader Joe's products I have. So we got our lemon juice, nutritional yeast. Are people familiar with nutritional yeast?
I bought some, but I don't know how to use it.
Yeah, you can use it on everything. It's so good. So I use it in almost all my cooking. If I'm doing soups, I throw it on top, salads. I hopefully in a future demo I'll teach you like a nut topping I do with nutritional yeast. That's like just delicious. And people from the demo always say they use it. So it adds like a richness. It's often used in vegan recipes as a replacement for cheese because it adds like that kind of cheesy nutty flavor. It has a lot of vitamin B12. It's high in protein. It's like all around a great use food. Do you want to speak a little more about it for
I
anyone?
think you said it. It's just only certain
Maybe someone
brands.
wants to talk. I bet Brian has a whole encyclopedia about it.
I have a question,
Yeah.
since we have a dietitian.
Yeah, registered dietitian.
Great, okay, so, should I put the nutritional yeast into my Instant Pot for soup, at the end? Or if I put it in at the beginning and then I cook with it, am I destroying that B12?
That's a good
Never
question.
really been sure about when's the right time to put it in.
Yeah, I don't think B12 gets destroyed because, you know, people hawk animal products because, of course, that's one of the main things that we're missing in a vegan diet is B12. And because it's, you know, it's stored in animal flesh, we store it in our flesh just like other animals do. And of course, you still get the B12 from the animal after it's been slaughtered and after you've cooked it to death on, you know, a skillet or in the oven or wherever you happen to cook your meat. And so putting it on after or before you cook shouldn't make a difference with the B12.
So,
My go
Is
questions. I'm gonna go
B12
grab something.
is there
Myself.
actually B12
Forgot
in meat?
myself.
Because
Yes.
I thought it was just cheese that has the B12.
There's definitely B12 and you're going to find it in most animal products. Eggs, dairy products, and then any kind of animal flesh.
But yeah, I always thought it was like something that, like it's the rennet in the cheese that gives you the B12 because it's going through the intestine of the animal. But is that not true? I mean,
No, yeah, we store a certain amount of it like in our tissues, so when you're eating animal muscle, you're going to get some B12 that way. Yes.
As far as I know, Red Star is the only nutritional yeast that has B12 in it.
Yes.
It's added to it.
Yeah, so just like a lot of our-
In all nutritional yeast.
Yes, so if you're buying it in bulk at Sprouts or Whole Foods, those kinds of places, you can buy nutritional yeast in bulk, as compared to this, which is made by Red Star and sold in a friendly little container, right? And it'll say right on there B vitamins. And yes, Jim is correct. It's only because it's been fortified with B12 that you're going to get B12 in something like nutritional yeast.
And
Otherwise,
that's true of the ones that are like at Sprouts and Whole Foods, that it's the Red Star primary grown nutritional yeast.
oh, the one that they sell in bulk, they're just throwing it in a bin?
Yes.
Perfect. So this is why we have great people in our audience. Because collectively we know a lot more than just any one of us does. Yes.
Oh, just one thing about the yeast. I sprinkle it on my dog and cat's food, and it prevents fleas.
Oh, wow.
So just for, yeah, it really does. And I know we don't have a big flea problem here, but sometimes we do with the rain.
Yeah.
So.
I had read an article that had suggested, I don't think it was conclusive, but it had suggested that B12 supplements actually prevent mosquitoes from wanting to bite you as well.
Yeah.
And I noticed when I camp, they don't really like me, so. So there's my scientific proof.
And for this person who has like nutritional yeast but doesn't exactly know where to start with it, popcorn is a beautiful.
Yeah, that's a good
place
place to start with.
If you sprinkle it on popcorn, you will be so happy.
It is wonderful popcorn. Yes.
So I have a long-standing argument with a vegan friend of mine. He takes supplements, and I say vegans don't eat supplements if you eat fermented foods. Am I full of shit, or is he?
Well, that's a good question. Great question.
We have that question.
Yeah.
Did you have a different question?
My question
Oh.
is,
Oh, hear the
does
question.
fermented food have B12? Because my theory is that vegans can get B12, and I have a vegan friend who says, no, we have to take supplements. So
No, that's not. I don't think that's true. I mean, B12 is in the soil too, so a lot of times this might gross people out. I don't always
Right.
wash my vegetables
Yeah.
because
That's
there's
what I do.
B12 all around us, and so
Totally.
I take a supplement like I don't know every few weeks when I remember.
Sure, yeah, some of that's just gonna come down to the person. I know of a vegan who I think went for like 26 years on no supplements. Before his MMA levels, which is your methylmalonic acid, that's like the true marker in your blood that's gonna show whether or not you have appropriate or low B12 levels. Before that number started to change to a level that was like abnormal. And then at that point he started to take B12. If anybody's going to be a vegan for a very long period of time, right? The best recommendations out there from, if you're looking at the research, are going to be just to take a supplement. It's very cheap and it's not bad for you, right? And so that being said, I can't speak to whether or not you can get enough of it from not washing your vegetables or maybe eating fermented foods. I don't think there's like high quality peer-reviewed scientific information available that may be possible. Now I'm not saying it's impossible, but there's just not science that demonstrates that it would be a good idea from like a research perspective to go for many years as a vegan without supplementing B12. But like I said, you could always do your blood work regularly.
Yeah, I
And
did
as long
it.
as those numbers are showing up normal,
They're fine.
and your homocysteine is normal as well, because low B12 can be something that can affect your homocysteine levels. And so, but if all your blood work looks good, then that's going to be the primary thing that'll tell you whether or not you need a supplement.
Mine's normal, damn it. The only thing about me that's normal.
But let's go back to Faith, because I don't want to because we're going to do question and answers at the end as well, and I don't want to take too much time away from the cooking demo.
No, it was perfect because I had an emergency salt issue. I had to find salt, so that worked out great. Did you want to say something real quick before we go on?
Oh, well, just that I also read studies that said that even people who do eat animal products are low on B12.
Yes, especially as we age.
The soil is so depleted and an older population.
And that's why not
It's not
washing
just the
vegetables
vegan
probably
issue.
is not enough, because our soils are so depleted.
Yeah.
And yes, and as we age, because our acid levels go down in our stomach, and we need acid to activate something called intrinsic factor, which then helps us absorb the vitamin B12 in foods. Many older people, their B12 levels tend to go down and down over time. And so that's why it's, generally speaking, just a good idea to supplement it, because supplements are one case for B12 where it's going to be more bioavailable or more easy for your body to absorb when you get it from a supplement as compared to getting it from whole foods, like getting it from animal products.
And how much B12 do we need in a day?
Generally speaking, I think it's good to if you have because they come in such high dosages, about 2,500 milligrams, or micrograms, sorry, B12 is in a very small equivalent, a microgram, which is 1,000th of a milligram, 2,500 per week, or about 500 per day. And it'll be hard for you to find anything less than 500, in one pill, just because they put so much of it in. Really, you probably could do on less than 500 a day, but 500 a day is good.
Apparently, if you do a
1,000.
serving of this, you get 1,000% of your daily. One serving of this is 1,000% of what's recommended.
There's a lot of vitamin B in nutritional yeast.
All right, so we'll go back to the recipe and we'll keep moving. So we got our vegetables in, lemon juice, nutritional yeast. We love that nutritional yeast. I could talk about it all day. So raw cashews. Got some raw cashews here. It doesn't matter if you use cashew pieces or whole cashews. I do recommend the raw. I would say about the cashews, like I said, you can soak them ahead of time, and that, if you have a less powered blender, helps to blend it better. Or you could boil some water, have them with boiled water. Otherwise, if you have a high powered blender, you don't need to. All right, now we're going to go on to our spices. And you know, all these things are meant to be adjustable. I did this kind of to my palate, but some people say I like things really salty, which I do. Salt's like my favorite. So anyhow, you can adjust these things to your preference. So I'm gonna add some salt. Calls for 1.5 teaspoons. This is really hard for me measuring. I think I just heard Ray say she measured. Okay, we'll do a little bit of garlic powder. 1/4 teaspoon. Oh, and I was just about to do a half. That was about to be real garlicky.
Yay.
Onion powder.
Is there a comment in the back?
Any questions or comments?
Ray, did you have a comment? I saw your hands going in the back.
Sorry, I just was talking.
Oh, that's fine. But if you have a comment, feel free because Faith is busy and so you could fill the silence.
Well, if anyone wants cayenne, especially if all I do is use it for this recipe, I will be able to cook this mac and cheese every day for the next 2,000 years.
You
But I
can start,
calculated
you
it,
can start
so-
a food pantry and give people cayenne when they come for their, pickup.
All right, so we got all of our spices in now. Now we just need some water in there. So, I mean, I love using vegetable juice from the boiling. So I saved the boiled water. However, I did find in this recipe, because of the sweet potato, it tends to make it a little sweeter, the mac and cheese, if you use it. So if that's something you don't mind, you certainly can. I felt like I'll just use it for something else and just keep this like more macaroni based. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question. When you boil the vegetables, how much water do you put?
It really doesn't matter, just enough to cover the vegetables.
Well, because, just to cover the vegetables.
Yeah.
Because I was told that the vitamins of the vegetables, they go into the water.
And that's why I do save the water, and that's why I do use it. I just, for this particular recipe, it tends to make it sweeter again because of the sweet potato. So,
Yeah.
but I saved it, even here at the demo space, I'm like, I'm gonna use it for something. Like, I hate waste, and that's where all the vitamins do go when you boil.
You could just steam them if you don't want to lose
Let's
them.
see.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna add some water. So the reason why it says a cup and a half to 2 cups is because it depends on how thick you want it. And I find that when you put it on the noodles initially, it can be kind of thin. But especially after you put it in the fridge, and if you're gonna have leftovers, it thickens up. So I tend to make it a little more on the thinner side because I want it to cover the noodles really well, and I like having that cheesy sauce everywhere. So it just depends on where you want it. And also, like, if you decide to take this recipe and use it as a dip, you probably do a cup and a half instead of 2 cups of water. So. All right, we're about to have some magic of Vitamix. So this is a new Vitamix to me because I had a different one and they all perform a little differently. So if I mess up, it'll be fun. We'll all learn. Let's see. I think I know how to work it. So you really want to get it blended well because you want the nuts to blend. And I'm sure it looks nice and creamy. Can you guys kind of see?
Wow.
Got a nice creamy sauce. So I'm just going to start pouring it on.
Looks just like nacho cheese. Straight out of the can.
Not from the can.
This one's straight out of nature. And Vitamix.
So we use brown rice noodles, so they're gluten-free.
Have you made enchiladas with that, like, cheese? Is that what you use if you were to get?
So, yeah, I use this cheese sauce for lots of different reasons. So when you make this recipe, it makes about 6.5 to 7 cups of cheese. So you really don't need that much for the recipe. So you can freeze this. A lot of times, like today, I was kind of messing around and I pre-made a sauce so that we could do another testing of what nacho cheese would taste like. And so basically it could really cover about 2 batches of noodles as it will here. So easily 2 servings. If you want to stretch it, you could even stretch it to 3 servings probably because it's a lot. But I wanted to load you guys up with some cheese. So we're just going to go for it.
At my house, we use it for enchiladas all the time.
Yeah.
Faith, you got us started on this, and we always have at least 4 containers
In the freezer. So it's great because you come home and you throw it in the water to start defrosting it, and then once it's defrosted enough, you can kind of break it out, put it in a pot, and as soon as you warm it up, it reconstitutes really well, and you just make your noodles. So I always have this in the freezer. And then again, do 2 versions. We're gonna do the regular version, and then who wants green chili mac and cheese? Okay. So we'll serve them both at once because we're gonna serve them on a plate. So we'll just serve them both at once. I've got another minute and 30 seconds until the noodles are done. So while the noodles are being done, we'll do the recipe again. So it's really gonna be in your head. So we're gonna make the same recipe again. So I've got my vegetables.
You should ask who doesn't want green chili.
It's an easier question.
It's easier to count.
Any questions why I'm doing the second round here? Since you guys should have this memorized by now, all right? Vegetables, half a cup of nutritional yeast, half a cup of cashews.
Is there a substitute for onions?
You know, you can omit the onions, and there is, and it's got a name that I...
Shallots?
No, but people who can't do onions probably can't do shallots. So.
Uh-huh.
It's an Indian spice, right? You probably know the name of it. It's like... Yes. Yeah.
Asafoetida?
Yeah.
That's what I call it. I don't know if that's pronounced correctly.
What's it called?
Asafoetida?
Or asafoetida.
Asafoetida.
Otherwise known as the devil's dong.
The asafoetida, it's actually a legume, but it's an Indian spice.
It smells kind of bad
Asafoetida.
if you open up the container of it, but it's got a good taste. It's got a good flavor.
Yucky.
I got some stuff called hing, H-I-N-G.
H-I-N-G. And it's a spice?
It really stinks.
Okay. I'm not familiar with
It
hing.
might be the same with onions.
So yeah, if you didn't want to do onion, that's an option. I had a friend who couldn't do onion, and she always used it, and I didn't prefer it. And it is stinky, but it is very similar to onion in a recipe for flavor.
Or there's fenugreek also. So it really is asafoetida that we're talking about.
I don't know. I don't know the flavor of asafoetida or fenugreek compared to onions per se.
Okay.
Occasionally, you may find something called cedar shoot at the Asian markets, which is an Asian substitute for onions.
There you go. Cedar shoot.
Cedar shoot.
Cool.
Sorry guys, it's gonna be loud for
It's actually
30 seconds. So if you guys want to start serving over here,
Looks like
and just
a
putting the
big
serving on a
batch.
plate. 20?
Am I gonna be on this side?
Yeah, so we'll do 20 plates. So do a half of this one and then we're gonna do another half. So you can be pretty generous because you can spread it out.
Are we gonna just take it to them or?
Why don't we serve it and then people can come up and get it.
Okay.
So I'm gonna go ahead and to make the green chili version, you add green chilies. I I really like using the juice of the green chilies because I feel like it harbors so much flavor. So I try to put as much of the juice as I can, and it's a mild, so I think we could be pretty generous with it. What the heck? Let's really go
Do you
for
blend
it.
that in or do you leave
I
it
do a
chunky?
light blend. That's why I blended it sufficiently. Don't stop her now.
It's mild.
It's mild. It shouldn't kill us, right?
And it's super healthy, right? So
It's got more vitamin C than orange.
the more the merrier.
Yeah. So I would just do now like blend it. You can always hand mix it, but I'll just lightly blend it. Perfect. All right. Now we're gonna do our next set and we'll serve and you guys can give some feedback. And then we're gonna end with some nacho cheese.
Yeah.
We'll test that next.
Is there anybody who didn't want green chili or doesn't want to try both? Because we're going to serve a little bit of each. So we'll so we'll make a few that are just the non-green chili for people that want those.
Yeah, if you raise your hands now, we can serve you now and then the rest will have both.
Who wants
Do we have
non-green
any?
chili? One non-green chili.
All right, just one taker.
There you go.
I was just thinking this would be good on asparagus. Cheese sauce.
I put on broccoli.
Oh yeah.
You could throw broccoli
Good on
in
any
it.
vegetable,
You could throw
right?
peas in it.
Because I think cheese on asparagus sounds weird to me, but somehow a veggie sauce sounds really perfect.
Thank you.
I guess you want to just start dishing that one up and then I can just follow behind you.
Yeah.
Do a half this and then I'll just do a half green chili.
Oh.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Looks good.
I like the sounds from the audience. I mean, it's kind of amazing just from those few vegetables how much sauce you can make. It's cool.
Can I pull down? Do you have any other sort of standard sauces that you really like?
Yes.
Such a simple process.
I do a dressing that Ray taught me that I use as a sauce a lot of times. It's nutritional yeast. And I can tell anyone after, we can do it at another demo. But it's pretty basic. It's actually a salad dressing, but I have put it on like warm quinoa or warm rice, and it's really good in all the ways.
Is that the
But it's
pesto thing?
And it's nutritional yeast, Bragg's amino acids, apple cider vinegar, olive oil, and water. So it's those 4 ingredients, or 5 ingredients if you count the water. And
Very
it's
not
the dish.
oil-free.
Very not oil-free, but it's delicious. Cool. This is probably cheesy enough to start with.
Can probably just pass these out.
Hey, so you're gonna be doing these every week?
Only if you promise to keep my dishes out there.
Oh, I heard it.
You're up front, so you're gonna get.
You can serve in the back.
Do we have
Dish out of both?
I think it's one of these.
Yes, it's half and half.
Yeah. Faye,
Yes.
you said nutritional yeast, Bragg amino acids, olive oil, what was the fourth thing?
Water, apple cider vinegar. And it's 1 cup nutritional yeast,
That's good for you.
1 cup olive oil, and the rest are all 1/3 cup.
And you can put less oil in it.
And I usually do more like maybe 2/3 a cup or 3/4 a cup of olive oil, but that was the original recipe.
I'll give this to you.
Do we have 20 plates up or no?
There's a couple more napkins for these here.
Hey Tony, did we have 20 plates up or?
No, we're gonna have to dish out a few more plates.
Okay, cool.
I think I counted what was it, about 16.
Okay, so about 5 more or so.
But one of those slightly lighter color.
We're close though.
The green chili just kind of lightens it up.
I would say 2 tablespoons salt.
Yeah, a little more salt. You're just like me, Jackie.
Well, if you want to like imitate them, the Kraft macaroni and cheese.
Right. No, I'm all about the salt.
You're welcome.
I'm sure they put loads of salt in there.
Oh, the green
And you know,
chili.
and Jackie's right. Jackie said she'd add more salt, and I think that this recipe When it's on its own, it's enough salt, but when you put it with the noodles, it could use probably a little extra salt. Because the noodles.
So you know, the hotter you like, we don't need to beat ourselves up, right?
Very nice.
Good? Good?
Yeah.
They've got napkins. Would you all just pass it to napkins down? Sir, you're welcome.
If only you could make potatoes and nutrition.
How many more folks need a plate?
Just need a fork. Perfect.
How many more people need a plate? Pretty good.
Thank you. Thank you, Tony. Lady.
And then 4 times as much.
You're welcome.
See, okay, so was the green chili too much? Because I almost feel like I
Not at all.
No,
Four
not at all.
times the amount.
You know what? The problem is I usually use hot green chili, and so I'm used to putting a lot less green chili. When you use the mild, I feel like you can't use too much.
Yeah.
How many more do you need?
Last one, did we get just the?
You guys too.
Great.
Hey, Tony, you have people's emails, right? So a few people have said they want that dressing recipe. If I send it to you, can you email it?
Yeah, I can send it to everybody.
Cool.
Yeah.
I like it.
I got one. Did everyone get one? Yeah?
No, that's my.
My helpers need some.
Thank you, yes.
Sorry.
I would probably do that too. I'm all about the most.
Is that it, these two?
All right, so while you guys are enjoying that, what's that? Yeah.
There's one here.
So while you guys are doing that, I'm just gonna quick talk about some alternative versions that I've included on the bottom. Because like I said, this recipe is intended to like take it and be creative and have fun with it. Like I said, you could throw vegetables in. If you're looking for a way to sneak in some extra protein, more fiber into it, throw a can of white beans while you're blending, or just add them after and you'll just have beans in it. It'll be delicious. You can add tofu in. I mean, these things just kind of blend in and will absorb the flavor. Won't alter it much, except for it'll add more protein and fiber and those sort of things. Especially if you're looking to make it like a one-stop dish. Another kind of fun thing I sometimes do is if like I roast some cauliflower, I'll put Frank's Red Hot sauce in it, and then it's like a buffalo dip. It's a buffalo cheese. Let's see. Initially, when I started doing this recipe, before I went like kind of more or less processed, I used to put Earth Balance in it or some kind of vegan butter, and that will kind of increase the indulgent flavors. So like if you're gonna go and try to convince people to be vegan, you might scoop in some butter, some vegan butter. Especially for people who have not necessarily had the real flavors of food. They can't appreciate it always. And so today, the next thing I'm gonna demonstrate is a way you can kind of make it into a nacho cheese. Real easy. I'm such a cheater. Taco seasoning. I'm just gonna add taco seasoning, and that's it. And it makes it taste like nacho cheese.
Wow.
So this is the same recipe, same sauce. I'm just adding the flavor. Literally just gonna stir it in. And I really think it's fun, like at home, I'll throw some black beans, tomatoes, beans on some nachos, and then toast it real quick, and then drip this all over it. And it's quite delicious.
You could do that layered salad.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you could do it on a salad, make like a taco salad.
Because the real one is so disgusting.
Could I see the package from the nacho thing?
Yeah, this is just a Trader Joe's with pretty basic. My one
taco mix.
Yeah, so this is a taco mix.
Okay.
I like Trader Joe's taco mix, but the one complaint I have is it does have added sugar, as many of them will have added sugar. So that's my one complaint. It's super easy to do your own. I was just doing a Cheater's version today, but if you add your own, basically it's cumin, more cayenne, like I don't have enough, garlic, onion, black pepper, bell pepper, oregano, and smoked paprika in this. So you're welcome to look at it, but you can make your own super easy. I, again, was just trying to do like the 1, 2, 3 simple. So.
But the reason barbecue ribs are so tasty is all the sugar.
And sugar does enhance flavor.
Otherwise, barbecue ribs are tasty.
I'm gonna quickly do a sample and see if we need more. I like it. I'm gonna add some chili out more. Right. So, are you guys almost done? Because what I was thinking we could do is, have you guys, we'll do like the first row lineup, we'll throw some chips and then I'll, is that cool? Okay, I'm like, you're laughing, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Because I think that would just be easiest.
So what do you put on your nachos, black beans and tomatoes?
Yeah, I throw black beans, tomatoes, oh, don't forget avocados. Avocados, cilantro, oh man, corn. Yeah, I go on the kidney beans, the black beans, I'll do both. You could do a salsa on top if you want that extra.
Did you say avocado? You probably
Yeah,
did, right?
avocado for sure.
Yeah.
I'll have to do a class of teaching some easy guacamole dips, because there's some fun alternative ways to make it. It was really easy to begin with, but I found some fun interesting ways. So.
There was.
So you all may be too distracted with all this good food. For a little nutrition lesson, maybe I should have gone first. But this is going to be super brief. The most important thing here is the engagement, the Q&A, and then certainly learning all the great tips from Faith about cooking, because you can hear all kinds of great tips about what you should eat and what you could eat and what you shouldn't eat, right? But unless you get the opportunity to see how easy it is to make some of these great foods and then to taste test them and see how awesome they can be, it doesn't really matter, you know, what people tell you to eat or to not to eat, right? But what I did was I plugged both of I plugged this recipe in. Fighting out of the red corner, we have the Velveeta mac. And so I took kind of a classic, everybody's probably heard of Velveeta. If you haven't, ask me and we can talk a little bit about it, but that's not super important. And so Velveeta, of course, is highly processed. It uses a lot of dairy, you know, cow's milk and dairy fats and things in it. And I plugged them into some nutrition analysis software so that it could spit out these, you know, nifty looking little nutrition facts labels like you'll see on the back of any food that you might buy at the store. And then of course these can kind of be confusing because it's just all these numbers and it's like, ah, that's overwhelming. So I tried to just throw a couple of little nifty circles around things to make it easy to highlight a few things. But you can see Faith's mac and cheese. And to make this a little bit more healthy on the right, I even used whole grain mac, just like we're using on the left. So that added some nutrients and stuff, some fiber. So you're going to see some fiber at the bottom. I only highlighted fiber on the APNM mac. You can see there's 8 grams of dietary fiber compared to only 4 in the other recipe, and they're getting all of that fiber from the whole grain pasta that I threw in there in the recipe. But you can see this recipe has a third of the total fat. It's got almost a tenth of the saturated fat, and saturated fat being the kind of one of the more dangerous fats, you know, saturated and trans fats. And then you can see trans fats are by far the worst, right? Those are the ones that have the highest kind of correlation with damaging our cardiovascular system and leading us down that road toward heart attacks and strokes and things like that, which is our #1 killer in the United States. And so dairy products naturally have small amounts of trans fat, and the dairy people don't usually like to, you know, tout that fact. Now it's a small amount, it's only about 0.4 grams per serving, but that's probably still enough to do some damage to your blood vessels, right? Especially if you're eating it day after day, year after year throughout your life. And so in this recipe, of course, we're not getting any trans fat by eating these whole plant-based foods, you know, from which this recipe is derived. And then, of course, we get a lot of polyunsaturated fats. Those are the healthy fats, the omega-3s and the omega-6s that you hear about. course, specifically the omega-3s. We want to get more of those and less of the other kinds of fats in our diets. And so wonderful there, we're getting the fats, some from the veggies in small amounts, and then a lot from those cashews, of course. Nuts and seeds have a lot of healthy fats, fiber, protein, that kind of stuff. Yes?
Why are we not supposed to eat saturated fat, but we're supposed to eat nuts which have saturated fat?
Well, nuts have a very small amount of saturated fat if you compare them to something like dairy, something like animal flesh, right? Eggs, things like that. And so it's going to be a very small amount of saturated fat that you're getting from nuts if you compare them to foods that are much higher in saturated fat, right? And then the other thing with nuts too is, you know, in this recipe we're using a half a cup of nuts, right? Compared to all those carrots, all those potatoes, those foods that are basically have no saturated fat in them. And so a half a cup of nuts spread throughout that whole recipe, per serving you're probably only getting maybe a tablespoon or two of nuts, and so that's going to be a very small amount of fat that's actually coming from the nut when you're eating the mac and cheese. And of course, predominantly you're going to find that nuts are made up of unsaturated fats as compared to saturated fats. And then of course, sodium wise, this recipe has half the sodium as according to the tablespoon or the teaspoon and a half that Faith used.
Compared to like a tablespoon.
Sure. And that's another good tip because Bill and Melinda Gates, who you've all probably heard of, they set up this awesome study. They got PhDs and research, you know, all these really awesome researchers together from all over the world. People who specialize in doing kind of nutrition and health related research. And as a result of that study, they looked at what are the key risk factors for early death, you know, disease, morbidity, and mortality, which is disease and death. And what they found is that not eating enough fruit was the leading cause of early death throughout the world, right? And that's really funny to hear because we always hear about how important veggies are. We know fruit's important too, but fruit's kind of a good gateway food to lead us toward other healthy ways of eating, including eating more vegetables, which we know are very important. Vegetables are wonderful. But that was the leading cause, based on that tremendous study that they did, was that not eating enough fruit was the biggest reason for cutting off years of life around the world. Number 2 was eating too much salt. And I know that's bad news. I don't like to be the dietitian that just brings all the bad news, but I only bring bad news in conjunction with good news. All right? And the good news is that, like you see here, the more whole, minimally or unprocessed plant-based foods you get in your diet, of course, those foods are naturally very low in sodium because we evolved eating those foods before we had salt shakers, you know, at every table. And so if you're filling up on those foods, they're high in fiber, they're low in sodium. If you get a little bit of extra salt in your diet to please your palate, no big deal. The other thing I do at home, because I know that too much sodium in the diet is the second leading risk factor for early death around the world, I decide to take the power into my own hands, right? And so I know that once salt's added to something, like once it's already in a can of beans or once it's already in your soup, you can't take it away, right? But you can always add it. And so I don't use any salt in my actual recipe cooking, you know, making a sauce, making a dressing, making a soup, whatever it may be. I just wait until the recipe's all ready to go. I've plated it and I've sat down at the dinner table, and then I break out. A lot of people will say don't use a salt shaker, right? Because we know we want to lower our salt. But if you wait until the end and then you just wait and you put salt on the top, you're actually able to use a lot less and get more flavor because the salt's sitting right on the surface of the food. So you can use less while simultaneously tasting more salt, and so that you get the salt that we all love without having to get too much in our diets, because we know it's not good from an overall health perspective, especially when it comes to risk for, you know, strokes. Yes?
Hi, is it okay to ask?
Yes, go ahead.
On this subject of salt, because like you, I stopped using salt almost completely, although recently I started using Himalayan sea salt, blah, blah, blah. But then I came across the thing about the lack of iodine, that iodine is really important in for our health, and so I finally went out and bought this big giant thing of iodized salt because I hadn't had iodized salt in quite a long time. And I started becoming concerned. I think it has to do with brain cells.
And of course, you know, looking back when we saw more diseases of deficiency, we see more diseases of excess now. We get too much of most things in our diets. But that's what led to those goiters that you'd see on people, was iodine deficiency. Of course, that's very rare, but iodine is a concern, and so you can get some iodine, of course, from just using some iodized salt. Or if you don't want to use iodized salt, you can just get a supplement, and you can just take an iodine supplement, and then you're not getting it with all the extra sodium. The other thing is, in all of our processed foods, they're probably predominantly using iodized salt in those, so if you're using a little sauce or a little dressing or something like that, unless it says sea salt, you're going to be getting some iodine in that way.
Oh, okay.
Yes, Ray.
For iodine, you can also, like when you're making soups and whatnot, put sea vegetable in.
Mm-hmm.
And if you put if you don't like the taste, I love the taste of it, but if you don't like the taste, just put a little in, and a little goes a long way with sea vegetable.
Yeah, I think kelp and maybe seaweed. There's certain kinds, I don't know if all sea vegetables have iodine, there may be certain kinds that are lower, but for the most part that is a good source for, your seaweeds, your kelps, things like that are going to have iodine in them.
Does
Yes.
anybody make iodized sea salt?
I don't know off the top of my
I
head.
thought I'd seen it.
It may be around.
Yeah,
For the most part, like this sea salt, unless it says something like, iodized, most of the time the sea salt's just going to be sea salt and it's not going to have, I don't think, any naturally occurring iodine. If it is, it'd probably be in very, very, very small concentrations. So it'd be better to use an iodized salt or just to take a small supplement, to make sure that you're going to get some iodine in your diet, or to get some sea vegetables, some of those sea greens in your diet. And then on the back, I included a couple of other things. These were things that I learned before I even started. I went back to school when I fell in love with nutrition and adopted a plant-based diet to become a registered dietitian, so that I could spread the good word for the rest of my life about, how good plants are for our bodies and for the planet and for the animals. Yes,
I've heard that a very critical factor is the ratio of potassium to sodium.
exactly.
Do you have any?
And that's what plant-based diets are so great about as well, because thank you for pointing that out, because I didn't point that out here, but I think I circled potassium and iron at the bottom. What was that?
Oh, the ratio on the Velveeta one is
Oh yeah, it's bad, right?
double the sodium. And
But yeah, and so we're going to get our potassium whenever we're eating fruits and veggies and whole grains and beans and stuff like that. And so the more of those plants you can pack in your diets, that's going to kick that potassium way up. And then of course, like I say, those foods are also naturally low in sodium, that it's going to help us prevent from having so much sodium and not enough potassium.
So not to be a bummer, but the big thing that seems to be missing is the calcium in this.
Sure, yeah, and so calcium's another issue, right?
Yeah.
Perhaps by
From spinach in. It'll make it
Oh,
green.
yes, yes,
It'll make
now,
it green, but it
Yeah,
won't
this
taste
is
like
what I'm
that.
thinking.
we have that minimum of, I think it's generally 1,000 milligrams of sodium for the general person, and then I think those needs increase a little bit for pregnant and breastfeeding women to maybe 1,200, and maybe for adolescent girls as well. But the general recs are right around 1,000 to 1,200. Those recommendations vary depending on what country you're in, so a lot of other countries don't recommend that people have that much calcium in their diets, right? Some of that may have to do with the fact that we have a very powerful dairy industry in this company, and we know that dairy foods are high, rich sources of calcium, and that's one of their big selling points from the dairy industry, right? Is that you need to get that calcium from cow's milk so you can build strong bones. But of course, if we look at the body of literature, the body of scientific evidence, that just doesn't hold up. There's no good research that shows that eating a lot of, dairy from cows is going to protect you from osteoporosis, is going to protect you from breaking your bones throughout life, is going to protect you from some of the common breaks like the hip fractures and the fractures of the larger bones. The studies don't show that dairy protects you from that. And so the best thing you can do is to eat a plant-based diet, and to do weight-bearing exercises, because when our muscles have that weight-bearing exercise, whether it's walking, whether it's running, jogging, whether it's weightlifting and strength training, that's going to be the best way to force your body into that remodeling mode, where your bones are forced to rebuild themselves. And that's going to be the best way that you can prevent the breakdown of the bones that lead toward osteoporosis over time. And then, of course, the dairy industry will claim that dairy is the most bioavailable, meaning best absorbable form of dairy out there. And the truth is that's just not true. If we look at some of our dark leafy greens, spinach, but especially things like kale and collard greens, the only problem with spinach is it's a vegetable that's high in a compound called oxalates. And the oxalates are calcium binders. So when you eat the spinach, because it's high in calcium but it's also high in oxalates, those oxalates are going to prevent some of the absorption of calcium in your gut. If you look at dark leafy greens like spinach, like collard greens and kale that are also rich in calcium but don't have as many oxalates in them, that helps them to be actually, they're about 50% bioavailable, so you get like a 50% absorption rate from of the calcium in those other dark leafy greens that are lower in oxalates compared to only about a 30% absorption rate from the calcium in dairy.
Does cooking spinach reduce the oxalates?
That I don't know off the top of my head.
Lemon juice would break it. I've heard lemon juice breaks down the oxalates.
Okay, so maybe citrus is a good idea. That's not to dissuade anybody from eating spinach. It's still a wonderfully healthy food. It's full of all kinds of wonderful nutrients. It's just, if thinking about bone health, especially as we age, if you can squeeze a few of those other dark leafy greens like collards and kale into your diet that are lower in oxalates, you may get a better absorption rate of, or just kind of maximize your absorption rate of calcium.
So is rhubarb bad for bones then?
Is rhubarb really high in oxalates?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It is. It is very high.
Just because something's high in oxalates, I don't think that necessarily makes it bad for bones. It's just going to perhaps limit the absorption of calcium to some extent, right?
I just wanted to mention too, one of the alternative options was to add tofu, and that's going to have calcium, which is a...
You know, I always thought soy has a lot of calcium, but I've been using, the Trader Joe's soy milk, and it has almost no calcium in it. Like the
it has to be
almond milk,
fortified
it's
with
added, right? The stuff that they actually add. I mean, if you get the milks where they add calcium, it has more calcium even than milk than cow milk. But because I was making yogurt out of the recommendation of you guys, but now that I'm postmenopausal, I do actually have to think about calcium, and I always thought this was BS before, but I have had my injuries, and so
Instead of adding water, get a fortified milk and add it. It'll make it creamier. It'll be very similar taste if you want to put calcium in it. Yeah.
Like I know that the almond milk I noticed is like super high in calcium.
Mm-hmm.
But then that Trader Joe's soy milk I thought would be high and it's not.
Cool.
Well, so that being said, I don't want to take too much of your all's time. There was some information on the back, but I won't go into that unless people have specific questions.
We have no idea what that chart is.
Sure. Well, this is just another representation of why plant-based diets are so important for our health. You all know we have an obesity epidemic in this country. We also just have a chronic disease epidemic, diabetes, obesity, heart disease, things like that. This just shows per pound of food how many calories are in each of those food groups. Okay, so vegetables are the lowest. You could eat a pound of veggies, about 100 calories per pound. If you drank a pound of olive oil, you're not going to do that, but it's just to create a comparison, it's to standardize it, right? A pound of any of these foods, you get about 4,000 calories. Or if you ate a pound of lard, whatever your fat of choice is. And so that's just to show, this isn't to say you shouldn't eat foods on the right of the graph, because nuts and seeds are about 3,000 calories per pound. We know those are wonderfully healthy for us, lots of protein, fiber, antioxidants, other vitamins, protein, right? But we just want to be aware of the portion sizes of some of those foods. But if you look at the foods in green, vegetables, fruits, unprocessed complex carbs, those are all your intact whole grains and root vegetables, things like potatoes and sweet potatoes. And then legumes, beans, split peas, and lentils. You can basically free feed on all those foods without having to worry about gaining weight, right? Science shows that that's why the arrow comes down at 550 calories per pound. Some pioneering research from Penn State University from a professor named Dr. Barbara Rolls. She's done all this work in this concepts of calorie density. And she's shown that naturally, if people average about 550 calories per pound, you see the lowest incidence of overweight and obesity. They just tend to be healthy weight. If they're just free feeding on kind of these more green foods and then eating the foods on the right-hand side of the graph, in smaller portions or avoiding them altogether, whether it's the animal products or the junk foods, things like that. But that's not to say to cut those out entirely. It's just the more we can eat on these whole plant-based foods, they also happen to be some of the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. So we're getting all the nutrients that our bodies are going to need to maximize health without getting more calories than we need, so that we gain too much weight, with obesity being a risk factor for chronic disease. And then this is just a nice kind of a placemat representation of how to easily take something like this, which doesn't really show me how to eat, and actually put it into a plate.
And what does CC stand for in this chart?
That's just complex carbohydrate.
Thank you.
Yeah, but those are just going to be all your intact whole grains. If I take a wheat berry, which is a whole grain wheat, they're called wheat berries before we grind them up into flour, and I turn it into whole wheat bread, I move over to that Proc CC, which is right under that 1400 calorie. And so whole wheat bread, just like whole wheat berries, they're good for us. It's a whole grain. But because I've ground it down into flour, I've changed the surface area of that grain, I'm able to pack more calories into less space. And whole wheat bread, I could eat a pound of wheat berries, just with some berries on top, or, you could eat it savory or sweet, kind of like oatmeal. Or I could eat a pound of wheat bread, even if it's 100% whole grain wheat, 500 calories compared to 1400 calories. So that's not to say don't eat whole wheat bread. That's just to know a lot of people love bread and they think, oh, I'm doing something really good for my health by eating whole grain wheat, and that's true. But if obesity or overweight is a problem, then try to choose the whole intact grain more than you're choosing the bread, if you're concerned about your weight. If you're just trying to maintain weight, or if you're wanting to gain weight, then you're wanting to pack more of these foods on the right-hand side of the graph into your diet, to make sure you're getting the calories that your body needs. Any more questions? Yes.
Yeah.
Is fish included with the animal products?
Yeah. So animal products kind of average around 1,000 calories per pound. Some are going to be a little bit less, the leaner cuts of meat. And then some are going to be more. Any of the really fatty kind of animal products are going to be more than 1,000. They just average about 1,000 calories per pound. Whether it's any kind of meat, generally dairy foods, and then generally, your eggs, stuff like that. Yes, you had a question.
Yeah, I was told to stay away from sugars,
Sure.
not only of white sugar, but from other products that they turn into sugar, like
Yes.
bread and pasta and all these things. And then I really wonder what I should eat, because pasta and bread are some of the things that we put the sauces and all the veggies.
Sure. Yeah, so generally speaking, if you're adopting a plant-based diet, you can't, most people, unless they adopt what we call a fruitarian diet, some of you may have heard of fruitarians, where they basically just eat fruits. Sometimes they'll supplement with some nuts and seeds and like some oil, because fruits are so low in calories that you have to eat a lot of fruit to get the calories that your body needs. But all these foods that are in green here are going to turn to sugar. They all have carbohydrate in them. The thing is, there's a difference between white flours or white sugar and something like brown rice, right? A whole intact grain, or legumes, beans, or potatoes, things like that. They have all that fiber that comes with the carbohydrate. And the fiber helps prevent a real rapid absorption of those sugars into your bloodstream, so that you don't get those spikes in blood sugar, which will lead then to those rapid dips in blood sugar, which can be dangerous. You don't want your blood sugar to be super high. You also don't want your blood sugar to be super low. But when you're eating all of these high fiber foods, these foods, in study after study after study, have been shown to be very good for blood sugar control, as opposed to being detrimental for blood sugar control. And so just because something turns to sugar, that doesn't mean it's unhealthy. Because glucose is the most basic form of sugar, and that's the primary source of energy that our body uses to do the work that we do on a daily basis. Moving around, cooking, working, thinking, that's all glucose. And so our bodies need sugar to do all of our life functions, right? It's in this kind of it's a primary nutrient that we use for energy. And so it's just, what sources are we getting those sugars from? There's more healthy, kind of more natural sources, and then there's more highly processed sources. And in general, the more natural whole sources of carbohydrates are going to be more health promoting. But just because something turns to sugar doesn't make it bad.
I'll just say real quick, if we have more questions related to the recipe and the ingredients, otherwise maybe I'll start cleaning up and people can address individual questions.
So, yeah, happy to wrap up.
Because we have lots of nutrition questions and a lot of recipes will bring up different nutrition aspects. This wasn't meant to cover everything. Otherwise, we're just going to book you for a whole separate thing.
Did you use